What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fifth album by N9ne. Basically, this album is called Everready, The Religion, and it came out in the fall of 2006. Now, this is a pretty large album. Definitely, I didn't realize that it went gold years later, but it did. It definitely had some hits on here. It has one of N9ne's overall most popular songs, which is Caribou Loose. That did a lot of damage. In the past, Jackal Goldkick has told me about a song that he remembers from a video game called 25 to Life, which Jellysickle was in the game 25 to Life, and it's also on this particular album, so that's a good bop on here. And then there's some other ones that were in like Madden 2006 and another one that was in 25 to Life called My Wife, My Bitch, My Girl. And then there was like Riot Maker that was on like a wrestling pay-per-view and stuff like that. So there were some ones on here that kind of had some particular kind of airplay. This is probably one of the more popular N9ne albums out. This is probably one of the N9ne albums that I would recommend to break him out of the alternative and underground airwaves as far as that's kind of concerned. This is just one that had some ones on here. Like there's a particular song that Eminem was supposed to be on, and it's a real shame that he wasn't. And that song is My World, that has Brother Lynch hung on there. That's definitely another of N9ne's best songs, I feel like. And this is just an overall good one. This is definitely a classic N9ne album. Has a lot of gems on here. Plenty of party moments, plenty of nightclub moments, plenty of ladies moments, plenty of just overall this craziness. There's some new metal on here, some rock moments, some craze, just kind of tilted out of your mind type moments. There's plenty of good stuff on here. Just a jam-packed album. The thing about this album that N9ne did is the fact that it's not just 10, 12, or 14 songs, but it's actually a pretty bulky 17 songs that it still winds up getting a pretty rave score for me. So Tech really packed this out into the gills and managed to pull it off. But another thing about this that I really didn't know until recently was the fact that this is kind of a double album. So it's not a full-blown N9ne double album, but it does have a second disc on here that kind of has like music from strange music artists, which I'm eventually going to review. I only knew about this for like the past couple days, but there was apparently like the double disc on here was like a collection of like there's some N9ne songs, there's some Cut Calhoun songs, there's some Scatterman and Snug Brim songs. There's some Chris Calico songs, stuff like that from the Strange Music label that was kind of around in 2006. And considering that this was before like N9ne collabos, like the first N9ne collabos album happened in like the summer of 2007. This is kind of a kickoff to like Strange Music as more albums started to come out. Because I want to say before this album, the only real Strange Music artist that had really had much, well, there were two, like Scatterman and Snug Brim dropped an album like in 2004, and then Cut Calhoun dropped the Blev album from 2004. But Strange Music was starting to blow up throughout the mid-late 2000s and such, so there is a double disc on here that I'm eventually going to get to. So I'm not going to review it now, but we'll get to it down the road. But I just would have to say there's some dope stuff on here. This is definitely a pretty classic N9ne album. This is horrorcore and juggalo type music. Also, he was going to Gathering of the Juggalos and those type moments. This has a lot of offhanded productions. There are some commercial moments, but I feel like this album is less commercial than Absolute Power. I feel like it's kind of one, but it just has like, you have to have a more acquired taste for productions to really full blown fuck with this project a little bit. I feel like songs like She Devil and like I'm a Playa. I feel like songs like I'm a Playa and She Devil and some of those type gems, and like Bianca's and Beatrice's and some of those type more hard hitting productions off of Absolute Power. Those were good ones, and definitely I feel like Absolute Power is pretty much damn near a classic, but this one has a little bit more offhand. Like I feel like About to Bubble is a pretty hit joint on here, but this kind of has more boom bap and kind of retro kind of production on here, which is just kind of, I probably would have went with Caribou Lou as far as like the single that probably should have anchored this project. But that's basically kind of the concept about it. But it is pretty much a gem, even though I gave like I'm gonna wind up giving like Everready the Religion a higher score than I gave Absolute Power. I feel like this album's probably better, but I do feel like Absolute Power is just a little bit more commercial and just had more kind of like affable kind of productions in terms of something that would be more of like a starting point. This is kind of more of like an acquired taste where it has some of N9ne's biggest songs on here, but I still kind of feel like there's just kind of more of a learning curve towards it, but it's not gonna match the score any. So that's kind of the thing about it. But so yeah, there's plenty to talk about on this album. There's plenty to talk about on this album. The first single is About to Bubble, and this was a pretty good kickoff to the album. I definitely felt like This is produced by longtime Tech9 producer Seven. So this is kind of an old school pounder. I would say it's a minimalist. This is kind of an old school pounder. I would say it's minimalist, but it really feels like you're getting cranked out of your mind. So I definitely feel like this is definitely one to get pretty torched to or get pretty crunk to, drunk to, that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. It's an easy one to kind of have plenty of shots, have a couple bottles, some Caribou Loose, some stuff like that, just to really get cranked to. This is a great overall thrilling kind of festive night as far as that's kind of concerned. Definitely a good party starter and overall kickoff gem to kind of have. But the thing about it is just the production kind of reminds me, this beat on here kind of reminds me of Chicken Noodle Soup by DJ Webstar, which I reviewed not too long ago. It's very similar to that one and that type of stuff. Just really has like the kind of fire, it has like the fire alarm type beat, kind of similar to Beyonce's Ring the Alarm and some of that type of stuff. But it works pretty well. It's just very minimalist. It's just very minimalist and old school. So it's something to know about it. But now, Wikipedia on Tech9's discography kind of says that Caribou Lou is kind of like the second single. It's a song that really is one of Tech9's most popular songs. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it's like the second single, despite the fact that it may not have had the full-blown official release. It has won awards. It went platinum, has tons of digital sales. It's just an overall highlight for Tech9 as far as one of his most popular moments. So I'm going to assume that that's like the second single. So Caribou Lou is like an excellent example for Night Fair. I would say it's a piercing crunk time and radio ready. I would feel like, and the thing about this song is the Caribou Lou song. There's an actual drink that you can make if you look around for it. That's Tech9's. That was his old de facto drink back in the late 2000s and 2010s and stuff. He doesn't, supposedly Tech9 doesn't drink as much anymore, but back in the day that was one of his de facto drinks, and just an overall pretty good time to get tortured. So I would definitely recommend seeking out like the recipe and making some of that on your own and stuff. It's an overall highlight, real hooky. Chris Calico, it's real hooky. It's just a real kind of slinky and overall centered club bop, just a real emphatic time, and Chris Calico helps out with this hook on there and some of the background vocals and that type of stuff. He's on here a number of times. That's definitely a good benefit. Definitely kind of good benefit to have Chris Calico on some of these because it just works real well. So that's some good stuff. But so yeah, there are 17 songs on here. Basically, there's 20 songs on here, but minus 3 interludes and skits. So there's 17. So I'm gonna go ahead and recommend like the 14 songs out of 17 I recommend. So those 14 songs would be Caribou Lou, My World, Bout to Bubble, Jelly Sickle, Welcome to the Midwest, No Can Do, Flash, Come Gangsta, It's What You Thinkin', The Beast, This Is Me, Fuck 'Em Girl, Riot Maker, and Night and Day. So a particular highlight on here that's just an extreme one that's probably one of the best songs on the album is My World. This was supposed to have Eminem on here, but Proof's death in 2006 kind of botched him from being on the song. He was kind of in a bad headspace at the time, so he was originally going to be on this song with Brother Lynch Hung and Tech9. It really would have worked extremely well, but My World is basically like a spooky, grim horrorcore like bop. I would say it's a real nice, eerie, some real nice eerie fare, and it's got a nice hook on there, really extremely nice hook on here, and it was just great overall. So it's just a pretty dope one to kind of get. So another haunting one that's pretty similar to My World is Welcome to the Midwest. This was originally supposed to have Twista on there, and that would have been a pretty wicked one to have seen, but he submitted his verse too late, so it didn't quite make the album. But I definitely think Twista and Tech9 would have torn this song up if they had both been on there. Twista, I mean, Tech9 and Chris Calico do a pretty good job on here, but Twista definitely could have annihilated this song. It would have been a great song to have heard him on. But this song is basically kind of like a ghoulish but composed kind of bop with some lyricism on here. So this is pretty lyrical one. It's just kind of a freakish, haunting gem with like a retro feel about it. It kind of has some stuff from like a show, something like that. Just really feels like ripped out of like the 60s, 70s, or old or something like that. Just some sort of haunting kind of Dracula-like type thing as far as that kind of goes. But I would definitely have to say it's just very ghoulish, but I do like the composition of this. I do like how composed this particular one kind of is. Just a very kind of just, yeah, just really feels like something you'd listen to just in like the heat of October or something like that, just kind of going along with that really kind of ghoulish and composed kind of atmosphere as far as that kind of goes. Just a nice one. Good club gem on here that's not quite as heavy hitting as Caribou Lou, but a nice one on here is No Can Do. This is like vintage Tech9. This is a vintage Tech9 bop, I would say. It's pretty similar to Here Comes Tech and Nina. This has that same kind of jazzy kind of pizzazz about it as far as that kind of goes. It's kind of ritzy as far as that kind of goes. It's a real kind of jittery one. Just a jivey hype dance club gem. I would definitely say it's just a good bop to kind of do. And I like how Chris Calico kind of helps out with this one. So this is another bop to kind of have as far as that kind of goes. It's a nice one. Another good gem on here is Jelly Sickle. This is a pretty hyphy and crunk type jam, I would say, with like a boppish nightclub feel. I definitely like this one. Has a lot of bounce and a festive jive about it. So I definitely have to say this is one of the more outlandish productions on here. This is definitely something similar to what E40 would do, and E40's on this song. So this is kind of like hyphy type stuff that E40 was doing back in 2006 with like Tell Me When to Go and some of that type stuff. Tech-9 and E40 pair ups are usually pretty good. So this is like a hyphy crunk type number. That's just kind of like a West Coast kind of bop on here. There's not a ton of songs like Jelly Sickle on here, but I would have to say another one that's kind of similar to that one is My Wife, My Bitch, My Girl. But I didn't like that one quite as much as I like Jelly Sickle. But this is just kind of like a hyphy type one that just has a lot of jive about it, and this works as a pretty boppish kind of dance cut as far as that kind of goes, I would say. So that's a nice one. Real kind of thrilling vibes. Come Gangsta is a pretty solid one. This is a Dracula-like horrorcore fanciness of a song. I would say it's got crisp, clean. It's a crisp, clean, murky gem for some autumn haze. I would definitely say, and this is kind of one that's kind of on that horrorcore tip, kind of similar to Welcome to the Midwest in my world. So I do like that there's some horrorcore on here. Tech-9. I mean, it didn't seem like he did that as much on Absolute Power. Maybe he did, but it just was not quite as flashy. But there's definitely some ones that he would later do on albums like KOD and some of that type of stuff. So horrorcore Tech-9 is definitely in here on full swing. Definitely like the Dracula-like piano type keys on the song of Come Gangsta. It's just an overall excellent one. Just another real composed one as far as that kind of goes. A real nice gem on here is Riot Maker. This is some glazed new metal thrills. I would say it's some good evening times, and it's a good song to get cranked to, and it's a nice party starter. So this is definitely one that kind of reminds me of something Limp Bizkit would do. Linkin Park to a lesser degree. Usually Linkin Park doesn't really do like party songs like this, but this is definitely something Tech-9 just fits in. Tech-9 just fits in extremely well with new metal. So this is definitely a good gem to kind of have. Definitely like the fact that he did this. He would do this later on like all sixes and sevens with like Welcome to the Midwest or one Midwest Choppers, I think it was called, something like that. So this is just a good starter to kind of get that. And this was unlike, you know, a lot of folks like Rap Cats in the 2000s didn't overtly kind of do rock rap that much. So Tech-9 was just kind of one that blurred the lines a little bit and pulled it off. So this is a good one for that. Fuck 'em Girl's a pretty nice ladies song. This is kind of a hazy evening gauze, I would say. This is some hazy evening gauze. It's a good slinky ladies gem, I would definitely say, and it has good bounce towards it, and it's a mini dance cut. So I like the fact that Chris Calico and Cut Calhoun are kind of on this song. Cut Calhoun's not on here too much, but it's a good pair up with Cut Calhoun and Chris Calico. Some good stuff to kind of get. It's just a real slinky kind of one that's kind of like just it's interesting how this is kind of like telling a story and that type of stuff. A little bit lyrical, a little bit kind of story barbs as far as that kind of goes, but it's still kind of a mini dance bop. Like the concept of it still having a little bit of bounce and kind of being a good jivey time. So that's a nice one. A nice cut on here is Flash. This is kind of a syrupy, slurred ode to jiggly women. Definitely like this one. It's a good concept and such, and it has some low-key pizzazz, and it's just good for some day after hours haze, I would definitely say. And it's a pretty catchy song, so it's definitely one for some women. This would have to say it's just an overall nice one. Definitely like that one. It's What You Thinkin' is another good bop. This is a slanted evening gem. I would say it's a good song to get tilted to, and it's got some good dance jive and bounce about it. This is kind of that reminds me of something that Baby Bash or T-Pain would do, something like that. Just kind of an evening kind of luau, kind of Malibu rum sipping type gem, I would definitely say. Just kind of evening and kind of sunset kind of haze as far as that kind of is concerned. Definitely like this one to kind of get as far as that kind of goes. This song just works as like some good slanted evening sunset type haze as far as that kind of goes. Just a good nice one to kind of just relax a bit and have some mojitos and kind of Malibu rum and that type of stuff. Definitely works. Night and Day is a pretty good gem on here. This is some pounding night venue fare, I would say. Chris Calico boosts this song pretty well, and it's just a good smoke a few cuts. So this is definitely one. This one just feels like you're zoning out, just smoking a whole bunch. This could be a residential kind of cut, but it definitely works as like some night venue fare. So this is another one to kind of pair up with My World. This is another one to kind of pair up with Caribou Lou and No Can Do and My World and Bout to Bubble and some of those type ones. Definitely some good gems on here as far as that kind of goes and such. Definitely like that one. This Is Me is kind of some vintage Tech-9. Definitely like this one. This is kind of a looming day commerce gem. I would say it's some good typical ruminating Tech-9. I would say, and it just reminds me of his Absolute Power days. So this is definitely one like if you like songs like Keep On Keeping On and like yada 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 off of Absolute Power. This is the same kind of ruminating type bop or typical kind of this ruminating fare for Tech-9 as far as that kind of goes, just in a more kind of thought-provoking kind of sense, but it's one that he pulls off. There's not a ton of songs like this on this album, but I kind of did particularly miss this style of Tech-9, so it's good to get another one like that on here. And then The Beast is a creeping night venue thriller. I would say it's a twinkling and thumping. It's got a twinkling and thumping beat, I would say, and it's a vanilla regular club night. So this is definitely one. This is another pounding one to kind of have. Kind of works like with Riot Maker and My World and Caribou and some of those type ones that are just good for some night venue flash. Definitely like this one. It just is a good pairing. So Tech had a number of cuts on here. This is a pretty stock and chock full album, just with plenty of good joints for stepping out as far as those kind of concerned. And not a lot of these are house party cuts. So I do feel like some of these probably could be just because of how low key, just because he didn't really have like radio singles. For the most part, Tech N9ne was definitely more underground around this time. But there are some good ones on here that just kind of work for like definitely Liddy house party fare, but also pretty, these could be mansion parties, stuff like that, just some good local residential type stuff. But it also works as like some night venue fare if you know places that would actually play some of these type things. It's low key to the point where some folks might just up the budget and just go with more folks like Eminem or Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg or something like that. But this is some good stuff on here to kind of have for some Liddy moments. Definitely recommend it, not just in Kansas City or Missouri or places like that, but just all around. Just some good bops and stuff like that to kind of have. Yeah, so that basically takes care of it. Talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here. Like, I really didn't like the beat at all of My Wife, My Bitch, My Girl. That was just kind of a poor rendition of like a bop on here. It just didn't quite turn out quite as well. It was just kind of trying to be thumping a little bit like Jelly Sickle or something like that, but it just didn't quite hold up quite as well. It was just kind of more filler, it felt like, and kind of subpar. And then there's a couple personable songs on here that I just didn't enjoy as much. Like Running Out of Time, I probably would have liked that one a little bit better if it had better production, because it's kind of personable Tech N9ne and ruminating Tech N9ne, kind of similar to the stuff that he's on This Is Me and some of those type ones. But I just felt like it just, I mean, normally Tech N9ne kind of excels at doing like these ruminating type bops on here, but I just felt like the production on this one just didn't match like the energy of what he was trying to convey on this one. It was just kind of a dud. And then the Rain just kind of had like a churches kind of beat that was just more personable and just kind of more homely oriented, that just didn't quite have the compellingness about it. And I mean, I do like personable Tech N9ne because he's very similar to Eminem and Hobson and NF and some of those cats that can do it. But both these productions just did not flatter Tech N9ne in order to get those to have more jump off the page kind of thing. So those were definitely two duds on there. But just to kind of say, I'm going to give this album like a 10 out of 10. Me liking 14 out of 17 on here, this album definitely gets a 10 out of 10. It's just one of Tech N9ne's best. I feel like some of my favorite Tech N9ne albums would be Absolute Power, KOD, and this album, Everready, The Religions. Just overall excellent. Has plenty of good night fare on here. Some really kind of edgy beats. I feel like Tech N9ne had a pretty slick ear for productions, and it just worked out extremely well. I do feel like there's somewhat of a learning curve. Like if you start off listening to like 50 Cent, Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Exhibit, and you try to listen to this, it's a little bit kind of more of like a learning curve to get towards it, just because these are some more alternative and outlandish, or this kind of more left field initially kind of productions. But once you get used to like the juggalo type culture and alternative type, once you get more used to like the juggalo culture and alternative type fare, as far as that's kind of concerned, this just really starts to hit home pretty easily. So that's some good stuff on here. Definite 10 out of 10. The social score I'm going to give like a 9 out of 10. The social score I'm going to give a 9 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but I kind of felt like Bout to Bubble is good, but it's just probably, I would definitely went with Caribou over this one. I think most folks nowadays probably just assume that Caribou is like the single, but it actually was Bout to Bubble, and that's just kind of one where it's good, but it just is very boom bap and minimalist-esque. I just kind of feel like it may not be like the attention grabber that is wholesomely. I mean, it's a great song to get drunk and fucked up to and get cranked and that type of stuff, but it just kind of has more of a learning curve. And really, apart from Caribou, I think some folks may think that the productions just don't have as much immediate kind of fare. Like Jelly Sickle's a good one. My World's a good one. Bout to Bubble is a good one. There's some horrorcore on here and stuff like that. But I just would have to say some of this kind of made make Tech N9ne feel like more of just like Caribou only being like the only good song. That's definitely not the case. You just have to experiment a little bit and be willing to kind of concoct some stuff and come up with what bops and gems you want to throw into like a playlist and stuff, as far as that kind of goes. So in terms of the future, like Tech N9ne dropped an album back in the summer of 2023. I'm not really sure what that one's called. Wikipedia doesn't write as many articles about him nowadays, but I know he's dropped some stuff recently, and he has a ton of things out of his catalog. I know he dropped an album back in 2021 called Asinine, so there is some more stuff. I'm going to get to some more of that, but this is definitely a classic Tech N9ne, classic Juggalo album.